racing. We're doing power steering stuff today, so everything's mounted other than the steering cylinder. We just need to put it back on. But we have to make all our hydraulic lines. So we have Hydraboost, power steering, and the steering cylinder. So that's a lot of lines, and we're going to make them all. We're not using any factory lines since there really wouldn't be a factory line that would work on our situation anyway. We are, remember, running an LT motor with a Corvette, a C5 Corvette power steering pump, which is mounted on the wrong side. It's on the passenger side. So those lines will be a little bit long. The other problem with those pumps is they don't have a reservoir on them. They just have a 3/4 inch bib pointing up that you would run to a reservoir yourself, and so your return lines will go to it. We have Hydraboost and power steering, so that's 2 return lines now. So this is a power steering reservoir off of a 6.2 diesel with Hydraboost. It has the line that would go to the pump, but it doesn't have any return lines since on those trucks they went to the pump itself. The pump had a reservoir, and then they had an additional reservoir up top. So we're going to use, I'm going to try to use, I hope it's big enough, this is a coolant reservoir. It should be big enough, but we'll see with the volume and everything. It should be big enough. The fluid level does go up and down quite a bit when you're using a steering cylinder. Obviously, when it's pushed one way, you have the thickness of the rod. That fluid is going to be displaced. When it's all the way in, like right now, there'll be more fluid in the reservoir. When it goes out the other way, there's going to be less fluid in the reservoir. So the fluid level will go down a lot. As long as we don't get a leak and leak fluid out, this should be more than adequate to displace the cylinder. They do have big rod ends though, so they do displace a decent amount of fluid. Okay, so for the lines, we're going to make all our own lines. They're all going to be Eaton Weatherhead line, which is what PSC would be giving you. And then these Eaton connectors that are just like doing fuel system stuff, except way heavier duty. They're steel. They have quite a bit more thread, and obviously it's going to be, everything's going to be a little tighter and harder to make, but it should work. I would actually be very curious to see someone do a test between this and a crimp connection to see what's stronger. I would probably put money on these. The problem with doing these ones is they're more expensive. The perk of doing these ones is you can make them in your shop without a crimper. Cutting the line is going to be very similar to the way I began doing it on the fuel system, where I cut around it with a cut-off wheel and then finish the cut with a razor-style cutter. We are going to also run filters on ours, two filters on both, one on both return lines, one from the Hydraboost, one from the power steering box. So the only thing that we have to change on our reservoir is I have to put a bulkhead fitting in it. So that we can have a bigger line. This little guy, if I were to put a fitting in it, I wouldn't trust that as supplying that pump with enough fluid. So we're going to put a bulkhead fitting down there and then run a 3/4 inch line down to the pump. I believe it's 3/4. I'm actually just guessing at that. I think that's what it is though. So anyway, let's get going on it. Let's get all this stuff in and start running our lines. And then I'm going to also, while I'm down there, run the lines for our stupid automatic for the cooler. And then I'm going to mount them in a way that I can rip them out and chuck them in the trash with the transmission when we convert it to a manual. I'm not a fan of automatics at all. And I don't think that thing's going to live long behind that LT motor. Those things make a lot of torque, a lot more torque than that Turbo 350 was ever designed to make. It is built with upgraded clutches and all that crap. But yeah, we'll see how long it lives. I don't think it'll live long. Well, I'm going to do my best to break it because I don't want it, so that'll force me to change it. All right, and so making these lines is almost identical to making the lines on the fuel system, the AN lines on that. This line is way stiffer. It has quite a bit more steel in it, especially than those hybrid lines that we used. So you got to pay attention. Always blow these lines out, even if you do it as careful as possible, like I did, where I went around it. I didn't cut all the way through to try to avoid getting stuff down there, but still blow them out when you're done, because you'll get stuff down in one way or another, and you want to keep it clean. So I put Vaseline on these when I'm doing transmission lines or hydraulic lines. I use Vaseline to assemble it. You could also use transmission fluid. That works just as good. Vaseline's just kind of nice. It's easy to put on there. And so what I'm pointing out now is this line, you cannot twist it. So if you're putting 90-degree fittings on like I'm doing, you have to make sure you index them right. So you have to pre-assemble the fitting, figure out which direction it's the 90 degree is pointing on the coupler part there that I'm threading on there, so that you can mark it. So that way, when you thread that on there, you can kind of stop when you get it right where you want it, or fudge it so that it's pointing where you want it, and then hold it and tighten down the inner fitting. And then hopefully it'll work out, because there's not much give in these lines at all for as far as twisting them. Hydraulic lines are hydraulic lines. They don't have much rotational twist to them. You just can't do it. The rest of the lines, I kind of build them as I go. That way I could make sure I really get the fittings pointing in the right direction. That's why I have one end hooked to the steering box, and the other end is actually, I just pulled it over the hood and made it in the vise that way so that I could have it indexed right. Pretty easy stuff. Kind of hard to film this stuff with much detail, so I'm just going to kind of skip over a lot of it, and then we'll go over the routing of it once we're done here. So that line I'm running just straight across. The other lines I run around the back side of the motor. So this lift is really, really slow, and I'm filming. I left it on here just so you can see. This is at 6 times speed in video. That's how slow this lift is. Terribly, terribly slow. Okay, so now for the steering cylinder. Before we mount it up, since I have that clamp-on coupler onto the steering, the crossover bar, I'm centering it. I have my wheel straight. In an ideal world, that's exactly how you would do it. Then you put your caps on and it stays there pretty good. It did not work out for me. I actually end up having to turn the wheels all the way to the right and then push the cylinder all the way into the right before I could mount it up, because I didn't have enough room on my arm. All right, so I came down today and I started playing with this, and next thing I knew, I made 2 lines. It is really easy to do, but I was trying to play around with the steering cylinder, and because I thought I was going to go up the control arm and back, and that's what I said I was going to do, and I ended up not doing that. So what I did is I just kind of came straight back off the steering box. If it'll focus right there. And then I just made a loop and then down to that steering arm. And as you can see, there's really nothing there. So the suspension's pretty much, it can go up about 3 inches farther up. And then obviously everything else is down. So down won't hit anything and up won't hit anything. So what we're going to do is tie these together, but we need to put some armor on them, because it will rub on this motor mount right here on the bracket there. So we're going to put some armor on it there, and then I think I'm going to put some armor on it here, because that cylinder can kind of rock on the sphericals. So I'm going to put some armor on it right there so that that line isn't rubbing on the truss of the axle. And otherwise it's good. It's not going to hit anything else, and that should work good for us. I don't see that ever being an issue. All right, and for armor, I'm using, this is Ag Line again, agricultural line. It's basically heater hose. I wouldn't use it as a heater hose just because it's not rated for that. But it works good. It's cheap. It's cheaper than heater hose, and it works great for making armor out of it. It does have the reinforcement like heater hose does, which isn't really necessary for the armor. So I'm just cutting it and then splitting it. And I always try to split it on the inside of the radius of the natural curve to it. That keeps it from trying to come off, if that makes sense. I mean, you're going to zip tie it anyway. We're going to use metal clamps on it, or that's what I chose to use on this one, is the metal zip ties. There are pros and cons of those metal zip ties. They look cool, they look nice, and they're strong, and they don't melt, and they don't deteriorate in the sun or whatever. But they're sharp, and so you could cut yourself on them, and that part's kind of annoying. That can happen, but you know, I don't know. I don't really plan on sticking my arm up in there very much. Anyway, it's not really in an area where there's something I need to service or anything, so I don't see it being an issue. But the first time I cut myself on them, I'll probably cut them off and put normal zip ties on it. But that goes good. You do with those, and I don't know why it is, you do have to use the tool. If you don't use the tool, for some reason they don't hold very good, and I don't know why that is. but they don't hold very good. And there it is done. After it's all done from the front, it does look pretty clean, and it flexes pretty good. I was kind of playing with it with a jack. It's going to work out just perfectly fine. Here I am drilling a weep hole. So I'm going to mount. See the upper line right above that steering brace that we made with that spherical underneath the steering box. I'm going to mount that line to it, and which means I have to drill into it. So I drilled the weep hole in just so it won't fill up with water. That's what I did underneath there. So here I'm mounting up the power steering reservoir. I'm going to mount it to the tab on the alternator. So we're going to make a bracket there and then modify that tank so that it looks nice. We're going to cut the top and bottom off and just make it a 2-bolt connector. All right, I just use a crescent wrench always to straighten everything out. That's just like a fabricator's tool, a crescent wrench. I have that giant one. I don't know if you've seen it in my videos, but I call it the crescent hammer. It's a big one. I welded a hammer on the other side, and it was something I used when we were building oil rigs and stuff. A lot when you're twisting a beam or something like that. So I'm drilling and tapping this thing so that it just makes it look cleaner. That is ore lube that I used on there. It's like a dry, it's like beeswax. It works really, really good though. I really like that stuff. I'm just roughing out. So now I'm going to cut around where that bracket goes just so we don't have tabs on the side of the tank. Just to try to make it look more purpose built for what we're using it for. So I'm just roughing it out with the portaband, and then I'm going to break them off, and then we go through it with a die grinder and clean it all up and make it look nice. Then we'll assemble it and then router around it with the Dremel tool some more, just to make it look as clean as possible. All right, and back to that ore lube. The reason I like that ore lube is because it doesn't get everywhere. It's not like oil on the surface, and it comes right off with the brake cleaner. It doesn't seem to. I never get fish eyes when I'm using that to drill and tap. If I'm going to just paint the part right away, just to be lazy, so I don't have to scrub the part down. Very good. So I just use a Dremel tool. I love those Dremel tools. They're so nice just for cleaning everything up. And I just made the parts match each other, you know, if that makes sense. Now we're going to paint it, and this is something that I like to do is when you make the loop that you're hanging your part by, make it real wide when it goes through the bolt hole, so you don't end up with a line from the wire going up. I mean, I don't know. I take things to professionals to have them painted, and they come back with lines from what they hung it with. I don't know why it drives me nuts. But anyway, it's usually like powder coating and stuff that does that. So I cheat when I'm using this is a satin paint. I heat gun in between coats, and then on the last coat, I just put a real light one on. And then let it air dry, and that way the satin looks good, if that makes sense. I don't know. It works pretty good. For some reason, if you force dry satin paint, it kind of gets glossy, or at least hit and miss glossy. Now I'm putting in. I took it back off. Now I'm putting in the bulkhead fitting. In the bottom, and of course there was a weld. That fitting that was on the bottom was welded. It was like a bung that was welded in, and of course there was weld left, so I had to die grind the crap out of it to get it flat. And then I'm using double O-rings, so I'm putting an O-ring on both sides with a washer then on top of it, and then I squeeze it down, so there's just really no chance that that'll leak on it. And then I'm also using those green O-rings, the AC style.
All right, we have a complete system. So I am going to go through the adapters real quick so that you know if you're doing something similar what adapter you need. I'm running all -6, so I'm going to skip the -6 part. I'm just going to tell you the threads on each device and whether it's an inlet or an outlet. So on the power steering pump, in this situation it's C5 Corvette pump, pretty common LS style. It is a 16 millimeter 1.5. And then it's to a -6. That's the outlet of the power steering pump. The inlet of the Hydraboost is a 18 millimeter 1.5. The outlet, which is on the driver's side, inlet's on the passenger side. The outlet is a 16 millimeter 1.5, just like the outlet on the power steering pump. Then it goes down to the inlet, which is again passenger side, to another 18 millimeter. You're seeing a common thing here, and then the outlet is a 16 millimeter. So outlets 16 millimeter, inlets 18 millimeter. That's pretty common here. And then also, if you want to think of it this way, inlets passenger side, outlets driver's side. You can think of it that way too. So the outlet of the steering box is just a return line. So it's a low pressure line, high volume on the steering box, and then there's also a additional third line on the Hydraboost. That's a return line as well. That does not flow a lot. That doesn't. It's a 3/8 barb, but it has a little 332 hole in the barb, or maybe even smaller than that. So that doesn't have a lot of volume. So if you have to, and I've done this, that orange K5 Blazer that we have has been running for about 200,000 miles. I've teed those two lines because the steering pump on it only had one return line, so I just teed them. It's never been a problem, and I don't really foresee that being a problem for most people. As long as you're running good 3/8 lines, I don't see that being a problem. There's not a lot of fluid, again, on that Hydraboost, or there shouldn't be, I should say. A lot of fluid coming back that return line. That's, I think, when you let off the brakes is when it'll surge. The pressure that's in the Hydraboost, when you let off, it'll surge and release it through that line, and that's what that line is for. Otherwise, it shouldn't really have any fluid going through it. Generally, but every time you let off the brakes, I think fluid will come through it, maybe even when you push them a little bit. So yeah, so that's that. So 16 outlet, 18 inlet, 16 outlet, 18 inlet, 16 outlet. Pretty simple. So then you get down to the steering cylinder. If you're running a PSC box, they come with -4s already in them. Those are an ORB adapter in there, so they're different than the adapters up here. These have the O-ring at the right here, where the ORBs have the O-ring up here at the top of the threads. So and those come pre-installed in there, and then they're -6. So those are pretty simple. And then the steering cylinder itself also has adapters on them. I believe they're also ORB, but they're -6. But they also come installed, so you don't have to worry about those. So yeah, very cool stuff. Very simple to do. Just be clean. That's the biggest thing. You don't want a bunch of junk in there, so just blow them out. So there it is. So we got the radiator installed. I kind of mounted that clever. You can go back and see us when we actually fabricated this, but there's an episode just on it. But it's mounted in with those polyurethane mounts, 4 of them, and then it's sitting inside grommets on the bottom, just sitting in them. So I just set it in. The nipples on the bottom of the radiator go through a grommet, and that centers it up, and then I just put the 4 mounting bolts in the side there. We originally, when we set this up, remember, we had the Pontiac motor, so we didn't have room for the fan on the other side, and that's biting us a little bit now because we actually do have room for it.
All right, and my audio crapped out right there, so I'll voice over the rest of it. So what I'm telling you is that a polar situation is a better situation. Pusher fans aren't as efficient as a polar fan would be, but if you can't fit a polar, then you can't fit a polar. So and you can't fit a pusher, then run a pusher. But in an ideal situation, poling is better. So here we just mounted it up. It went good. There's the video on it. There's a video on it, one of the earlier videos of the build, actually, on building it. And here I am playing with the Backhoe. That's how you properly remove a transmission transfer case. And there's how you remove a slip tank. And here's how you remove tires. And then here's how you tear a car in half. I'm pretty much just playing with it. I needed to remove the tires and stuff, and I obviously needed to make sure that those tanks didn't have anything in them before I brought them to the scrapyard. And I'm going to take the rear blade off because I want to use it for grading with my bucket, so I can grab onto that blade with the bucket and try to grade with it. And then I'm kind of just playing with the thing now. I'm just folding stuff up and moving it around and trying to get better with this backhoe. I got really good with an excavator, but backhoes, the controls are different, so I struggled. So I'm kind of playing with it more than anything, and it's just kind of fun just to squish stuff up. I don't know why. It just is. And it's probably, I'm having fun just watching it and telling you about it. And now I'm just picking up little pieces. I actually am getting kind of good with it. Now I'm going to suck with excavators instead. So it is what it is. Here is the cab and the front clip smushed in a ball. The front clip I ended up taking off and moving to the front of the trailer. There it is there. And then that's the cab and the doors and all that stuff squished into a ball, and the seats and everything's still in there. Steering column, all that stuff. That's still in that ball. And then that's a hood taco. It had all the miscellaneous parts as the filler, and then a hood taco shell. So if you haven't gone on to DBOS for their International Car Show, and they spell it with the TER, go on there and vote. Obviously, you're going to vote for me because it's the coolest project, but in actuality, go on there and vote for whoever does have the coolest project in your perspective. I need the subscribers. Everyone else needs the subscribers, so vote for whoever you want. I think you can vote for as many as you want, so you can vote for everyone if you wanted. So anyway, thanks for watching. I'm going to go start working on exhaust because I want to, not because it's necessarily the next project in line, but I have the stuff to do it and I want to do it, so I'm going to do that next.